So we have finally reached the knitting prime time of this year, and fall is in full swing, at least where I am. So I'm really excited to share all of my fall knitting plans with you. And I really wish I could record this video sooner, but I was busy soaking up all of the remaining summery days and all of the good sunny weather we have left before September was over. And also life kind of got in the way, which it sometimes does, but in hindsight, it gave me more time to think through what I want to be knitting this fall, and I'm really confident about my list. I'm really excited about all of the stuff I have on my needles as well as in my queue, so I can't wait to share it all with you. And as always, before we begin, please consider subscribing so you don't miss my future videos. I've actually made quite a head start on my fall knitting back in August and September because I was traveling a lot and had just plenty of downtime to do nothing but knit during train rides. And when I got back, I decided it's time to finally tackle a project that I've been putting off for a really long time. I think you might have actually noticed it in the background of my previous video and in this video as well. I have found a very generous cut of this William Morris fabric in a thrift store last year, and it was one of those finds where you just kind of look around and make sure that nobody else notices that you picked it up until you can, run to the checkout and make sure it's yours. And ever since I got it, I knew it was destined to become throw pillows, but I also thought that it needed piping to make it more elevated because this fabric is absolutely gorgeous. It's, I think, cotton sateen. I needed to do it justice, but I haven't actually done piping before, so thankfully I can always rely on Craftsy, who are kindly sponsoring today's video to help me tackle any crafting task. They're an amazing online community and resource for creatives of every skill level and every interest. You can always stay inspired with Craftsy because they offer over 2,000 classes in more than 20 different categories, including knitting, sewing, crochet, woodworking, quilting, and so much more. There's always something new on Craftsy to explore. This time I needed their help in leveling up my sewing skills because I really wanted to do this beautiful fabric justice, and the class I chose was Sew Like a Designer by Jacques Goldsmith. This is a very extensive class that is covering basically everything you need to know to give your finished garment or sewing project a really polished and professional finish. So everything from pockets, welt pockets, cuffs, seam finishings to, of course, piping, which is exactly what I was looking for. Of course, this class is mostly covering garment finishings, but I think the skills you will learn during this class will be helpful in any other sewing project, as you can see from my example, because I'm really happy with this pillow. I think the piping went really well, even though I was really nervous doing it, especially at the corners here. And despite the vast amount of material covered in this class, it's still really easy to follow because Jacques is a great teacher with whom you really feel at ease with. And I can say the same for every other Craftsy class I've tried. I have been really impressed with them. They're all taught by professionals who seem eager to share their knowledge with you, and it's so refreshing to see. So if you want to explore Craftsy, please make sure you follow the link in the description because the first 1,000 of you to click the link will get a full year of Craftsy Premium membership for just $1.49. And this will include access to every single Craftsy class for you to explore for a full year, but it is valid for new members only. So make sure you follow the link in the description, and thank you so much, Craftsy, for sponsoring today's video. You are absolutely correct. It's the next day because I couldn't continue filming yesterday. It got so dark. The sky just turned black and the streetlights were turned on, and it was like 2 p.m. So let's finally get into the list. The first project I have for you is something I started in September, and I was really excited about it because, first of all, it's the pattern that has been just stuck in my brain ever since I first saw it, and I think it's true for a lot of people because it went a little bit viral. Also, it's been a great stash busting project because something I have to mention about my knitting plans for this season is that I am planning to work almost exclusively from stash. I wouldn't say that I have like enormous hoarding style stash, or like, how do you call it, the sable stash or something like that, like stash beyond life expectancy. Like, it's not that bad, but considering I live in a really small apartment that can be considered a studio apartment basically. I think 8 kilograms of yarn is quite a lot, and I have a goal of getting at least until 5 kilograms by the end of the year. I think I'll get there, especially with all of the bulkier sweaters I have on my needles right now, and this one specifically I have good hopes for in terms of how much it will reduce my stash. Anyway, I'm talking about the Rosie Sweater by Lana. It doesn't really look like much now, it just looks like a black blob, but I already finished all the shoulder shaping, the sleeve cap shaping, and have started the color work, and I can finally see this flower motif starting to form, which is really exciting. But at this point I am having a love-hate relationship with this pattern, or maybe not the pattern specifically, but this project, because the pattern is great. I really love Lana patterns. I am really regretting my yarn choice at the moment. I really love the fabric it gives me, but the experience of knitting this color work with 3 strands for each color is just miserable. When I first cast on this project, I immediately took it with me on a train ride for one of my trips, and I think I managed to do all the shaping and all of the main color bit for the shoulders in less than 2 days. It was just a really engaging and fun knit. Then I only managed to knit 2 rounds of color work before I decided that it's not a travel friendly project anymore. It tangles like crazy. I think at this point I have to untwist my yarns and undo any little tangles at least 5 times for each color work round, which is not ideal for a relaxing knitting experience, but still I'm super excited about this project because I really love the color selection I chose. I adore this pattern, and I think it would be a really nice addition to my wardrobe in general. So I'm gonna walk you through my absolutely ridiculous yarn combo for this sweater, and for the main color I'm using this Knitting for Olive Merino in the shade Licorice, and I'm holding it together with 2 different mohairs. So the first one is this Lana Gatto Silk Mohair Luxe, which is the yarn I used for my Amy slipover. I mixed it with a sock yarn and it gave me a really nice black fabric that is slightly shimmery because this yarn has some metallic in it. And that's not all, because I'm also adding this acrylic mohair or nylon mohair from Alize. It's their Kid Royal mohair, and it's a really affordable choice. It's a little bit thinner than regular silk mohairs, but if you want to just bulk up your fabric a little bit, it's a great choice. Plus it has, I think, 500 meters for 50 grams, so it goes a long way. And this is the combo for my main color. It again has this super slight shimmer to it, which I really love. And because ever since I saw this pattern for the first time, I knew I needed to make my version in black and white. I wanted to find a white or off-white yarn in my stash to use for my contrast color, and what I came up with was using this Mondim from Retrosaria, which is their non-superwash sock yarn. I raved about this one before. It's one of the nicest sock yarns or fingering weight yarns out there. To be honest, I love it even more than Knitting for Olive Merino, but it is a little bit more toothy. I used it in combination with these 2 yarns. This is also Kid Royal from Alize in the shade that is gonna pop up on the screen because I don't have the yarn band anymore. And this is Lana Gatto Silk Mohair, which doesn't have any metallic in it. The only solution I found so far is to keep these yarns separate by putting them into different plastic bags and tying them really tightly to don't have them overlap or interact in my project bag. And since I figured out the system of just having my yarn in 2 separate plastic bags on the table so I can always kind of, rotate through them, it's been going much quicker, but this project is definitely an exercise in patience. I also misunderstood the instructions and specifically the recommendations for the needle size, because on the Ravelry page at the very top of the page it says that it's knit on 4mm needles and on 4.5. I thought judging by the regular kind of logic of needle size suggestions, I thought that 4.5 is used for the body and 4 is used for the ribbing, but as far as I understand now, it's not the case. You use 4mm needles for the body and 4.5 to increase your needle size for the color work, which is something I don't actually do that much. I don't see my gauge change when I start to do color work, so I skipped this step. I just cast it on 4.5, and I did do a swatch, but I mostly did a swatch to check how how my yarn combination would look together, and I didn't measure my gauge. I'm so sorry. So now I'm kind of stuck knitting this super oversized sweater, which isn't actually a bad thing. I think I will still enjoy wearing it, but I think I will need to do some sort of modifications to at least make the sleeves more tapered or just shorter in general to kind of make sure that I have enough yarn. I'm not really worried about it. I think I will have enough, but just in case when I get to the sleeves and the body, I might think of a way to make it less roomy for me. And I will tell you more about it the more I knit it, but for now I only have good things to say about the pattern. I really love the sleeve construction. I knit this before on the Harriet sweater, and it's one of the most kind of comfortable in terms of fit and knitting experience sleeve construction for colorwork sweaters like this. Perhaps it's not the most beginner-friendly construction method, but I think once you get the hang of it, it's pretty easy to follow, and I'm actually really happy that Linnit released another sweater with the same construction, because after I finished my Harriet sweater, I was considering knitting it again, but with a different colorwork motif, like something self-drafted, or just, you know, inserting another colorwork motif from a different pattern. But the Rosie sweater is perfect as it is, so I'm very excited to continue knitting on it. At some point, I will be done with colorwork and will have to just continue in stockinette, so at least I'm looking forward to that. And continuing on, I have another Linnit pattern that I'm planning to knit this fall, and this is her Porcelain Yoke sweater. I haven't gotten very far on it, as you can see, even though I actually started it in July, but I decided to park it at the end of July because it was way too hot to work on it, and I picked it up again a couple of days ago. Thankfully, I was right at the point where I needed to do this big stockinette section in the main color, so it was really easy to get into the flow of knitting it again. And the yarn I'm using for it is also from Knitting for Olive. I'm saying it like I have more than one strand of Knitting for Olive yarn in the Rosie sweater, but whatever. I'm using Knitting for Olive Merino in the shade Marzipan, if I'm not mistaken, held together with this mohair I already had in my stash. I unfortunately wasn't able to afford a full quantity of Knitting for Olive silk mohair for the main color. I only picked up Knitting for Olive mohair for the contrast color. This one is working just as well. It's maybe not as soft and like super cloudy and fluffy, but it does the job, plus it matches this color pretty well. And for my contrast color, I'm using this merino from Knitting for Olive and their soft silk mohair, both in the shade Dark Mousse. Together they give me this really slightly mossy green brown shade, which I think looks really beautiful, and I think in general my color selection is quite successful. I decided I don't want to go the kind of classic porcelain route with a really bright blue. I wanted to have something more muted, and the only modification I've made so far is knitting the ribbing in twisted rib, or it's actually half twisted rib for the folded neckline, because I think it looks really neat. And I also have something I already don't like about the pattern. I really don't like that the shaping is done before you start the color work, so you do this short row shaping at the back in the main color, and I think it gives it a really weird slope, which I don't really like. For example, on this Lumme sweater that I'm wearing, the shaping is done after you are done with the color work, so it's really seamless. It's only on the stockinette side, and it doesn't disrupt the beginning of the yoke here. As I said in my colorwork yoke roundup video, I think this type of shaping can look fine in some other colorwork designs, especially the ones where you kind of slowly grow the number of stitches with the contrast color in them, and it looks kind of like a gradient at the beginning. But in this pattern, your second round of the colorwork chart is done exclusively in the contrast color, so I think the line and like the transition is too abrupt for this sort of construction to work, but maybe I'm overthinking it. In any case, it's on me for not reading through the instructions beforehand, because if I did, I might have modified it. But anyway, it will be covered with my hair anyways. I'm just kind of putting my opinion out there. This yarn combo that I'm using for my porcelain sweater is actually not my first choice. I originally wanted to use this Loch Lomond from BC Garn. It's their tweed in the color 16. It's a beautiful navy color, and for my contrast color I wanted to use this Semilla Melange, also from BC Garn. It's one of my favorite yarn combinations in terms of softness. I love both of these yarns. They're just amazing to work with, and they also wear really well. But then I decided against it. I wanted to do a more kind of conventional version of the porcelain sweater with a lighter main color, and I don't have enough of this yarn to use as my main color, so I instead cast on the Puro Cardigan Light from Yamamuro. I am sad to report that I frogged it. I have nothing against the pattern and the designer. The pattern is wonderful. The design itself, the cardigan, is great, and I would love to have it in my wardrobe, but it was a really kind of conscious decision to frog it, and I'll explain why. So I started knitting it, and then just a couple of days later I got really sick, and because it was stockinette, I continued knitting it while I was sick. I was knitting it in bed and watching Severance. When I got better, I kind of didn't want to touch it anymore because it reminded me of the time when I was really sick. I really didn't want to continue it. It just gave me this like really negative feeling. I also had the same situation with my Simplice blouse, which I was knitting in spring. I also did like 70% of work on it when I was really sick, and I was in a lot of pain. I just couldn't wear that finished object. Maybe it's kind of too much information, or like not what you clicked on this video for, but maybe somebody can relate. I really hope maybe somebody will find this information like useful or at least relatable. I just couldn't wear that cardigan. I really loved it. There was, again, nothing wrong with it, but I didn't want to touch it. Like every time I touched it, it reminded me of this just pain I was in, so I ended up gifting it away. I never even wore it once. So I gave it to somebody who obviously has no negative connotations regarding it, and I'm still probably gonna make both the Simplice blouse and the Puro cardigan in the future, but not right now. I want to move on to something different, to something kind of fresh in my mind, and in the future I will be really mindful about what I'm knitting while I'm sick, and maybe I would sometimes have to make a decision to not knit at all, because as I explained in my previous podcast, I also get terrible brain fog when I'm sick, and I, for example, made a lot of mistakes on my Jenny jacket, which was supposed to be finished by now, but I made, again, a conscious decision to park it until at least winter, maybe spring, because at this point I have to rip out both of the front panels because I messed up the increases, but we'll come back to both of these projects in spring or in winter, just not right now. And to be honest, I'm thinking maybe I still want to use this Loch Lomond yarn with this yarn as my contrast color for some kind of colorwork project, but I don't want to knit any colorwork yokes at the moment because I am so overwhelmed by the amount of beautiful colorwork yoke sweaters. I'm actually working on the second part of my roundup for colorwork yokes, and I'm just obsessed with all of them, and it's really hard to choose. So I will let you know later if I come up with anything, but for now, I have another project which is nearly finished and I really need to focus my attention on. And I, of course, mean my heather sweater, which I am knitting for my boyfriend, and it has been in hibernation all summer, but now I am ready to finally be done with it. I'm so sorry, I'm so sick of this project, and again, nothing wrong with the pattern, nothing wrong with the designer. It's a beautiful sweater and I highly recommend it unless you are used to knitting a smaller size for yourself and you suddenly need to knit the largest size for your boyfriend who is almost 2 meters tall. So yeah, I'm not really enjoying it, to be honest. I'm over it, but I have to finish it, and he already tried it on a couple of times and I think it's gonna look beautiful on him. I am finished with the first sleeve. I am right now at a point where I need to finish the Italian bind off for the body, and I only need to do the second sleeve, but I'm kind of in a pickle because I knit the first sleeve before I put the sweater into hibernation. I think I did a different stitch count and like different increase ratio, or like, sorry, decrease ratio for the sloped sleeve. I can't find any notes about what I did, and I either have to try and like deduce it from the stitches themselves. I think I'm pretty good at like counting the stitches and reading my knitting, but part of me wants to just rip out the sleeve and do both sleeves again, it's this really kind of intrusive thought that I've been having to just rip back the sleeve because I immediately think that maybe something is wrong with it. Maybe I need to make it a little bit bigger. I don't know. I think I need to just get over it and start the second sleeve. I am using this yarn from Alize, which is a really affordable yarn. It's their large or like thicker sock yarn. It's called Wooltime and it does the job. It's pretty affordable and it actually is really soft and it has nylon in it because it's a sock yarn, so it's going to be easier for him to take care of the sweater once it's finished. I just hope the next time you see me, you will see this object finished finally. I will let you know how it goes. I'm super excited to finish this one because it will be 1 kilo of yarn out of my stash and I can't wait to update my little Excel sheet with all of my yarn listings to see the number be reduced drastically. Anyway, I'm really trying to finish this one. And the last sweater I want to show you today is actually a finished object. I had it in my fall knitting plans, but I'm really glad I was able to finish it before the fall started because I got quite a lot of wear out of it in September. And this is my cloud sweater. It's super simple. It's made in the most boring color imaginable, but it's so useful to have in my wardrobe. I found like a million uses for it, a million different outfits to wear it with, but I picked it up when I got better after my little illness. I was a little bit depressed, so when I looked at this sweater, I was like, why am I knitting this? It's so boring. It's like there's nothing special about it, and maybe I need to just frog it and do something else with this yarn. Maybe it's not the best use of my time. Then I found the initial swatch I did to just see how this yarn like behaves after blocking, and I really fell in love with it all over again because this yarn really softens with blocking and nicely and beautifully blooms, and it's perfect for a simple stockinette project. It's also a really affordable yarn. This is the Renew wool from Fibro Natura, and it's I think 35% recycled wool, yeah. So 65% virgin wool and 35% repurposed wool. I actually have about 200 grams left over, which I'm saying goodbye to. I am planning to destash them because I don't really need this yarn for anything else. I'm not saying I don't want to use it again, but I just don't need it in my stash. As I said, I'm trying to really reduce the amount of space that yarn takes up in my apartment. So anyway, I love this cloud sweater. I was knitting size medium and I tried to stick to the pattern as close as possible. I still changed my decrease ratio on the sleeves because when I, if you remember, knit my original cloud sweater, I had to redo my sleeves because they were way too wide for the size I chose. I was knitting that one in a smaller size. Also, something I highly recommend you do as well if you knit this pattern is decrease your needle size for this little ribbing and the curled cuff. I decreased my needle size to 4 millimeters and knit the curled stockinette section in 4 millimeters as well, but then for the bind off I switched back to 4.5, which is the recommended needle size for the whole sweater, just so the bind off is a little bit stretchy and roomy. And I did the same thing on the stockinette collar. Here it's really so straightforward, so simple. It's a really well loved pattern for a reason. I also think this curled neckline looks really flattering on me, or like just really fun. I'm also planning to knit 2 cardigans this fall and I gotta start on both of them, and I think one of them will be finished at least by the end of this month, if not sooner, because I've been having so much fun knitting it. Both of the cardigans are in stockinette, so nothing fancy, and the first one is the Maggie Cardigan, which is a pattern that needs no introduction. It's something I tried to knit in a different yarn I think 2 years ago, but I wasn't able to get the correct row gauge for that project, so I frogged it and used the yarn for something else. I decided to try it one more time because I feel like, especially since I gave away my Simplice blouse, I needed a short-sleeved cardigan or like a button-up wool blouse. I decided to give it a go, and the yarn I'm using is a really funky and interesting yarn. So this is a really thin sort of boucle yarn or like spiral spun yarn from a cone, which I picked up at my local yarn store, and it doesn't have a commercial brand name. It just says Effetto Onde a bunch of numbers, and it's from Filati Biagoli Modesto. My Italian is awful, I'm sorry, but it's 70% cashmere and 30% polyamide, but it feels like cashmere. It's probably not the highest grade of cashmere, but it's super soft and it blooms with blocking, so probably like with a lot of cashmeres, it's better to block it a couple of times, because the more you wash it, the more these cashmere fibers open up and fill in all the little gaps, and there are a lot of gaps with this. The stitches are a little bit thick and thin, and the stitch definition is kind of wavy, but judging by the swatch I did, it will all fill in the end, especially if I block it twice. So I'm really excited to see this one finished, which I know won't happen anytime soon realistically, because it's knit on 3mm needles, and also my row gauge is too small yet again, so I have to do more rows than described in the pattern to reach the intended length. And this was really tricky to do during sleeve shaping, because it has a contiguous sleeve which kind of turns into a raglan later on, similar to the Rosie sweater and the Harriet sweater, but I had to do a few kind of sneaky rounds with no increases and no shaping, just to extend the length of this sleeve cap. I also somehow ended up casting on more stitches for the underarm than the pattern instructs for my size, which is extra small. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it asks you to cast on 2 extra stitches, which is kind of ridiculous if you ask me. It's way too small, especially on this gauge, so I instead cast on 10, and I'm really happy with this decision. I think it fits me really well, mostly because I'm trying it on constantly and like adjusting. Right now I'm at a point where I finally don't have to do any math to match my length to the pattern's length because of the row gauge issue, and I can just knit straight until I'm done basically. And this is the project I was taking the most with me on my train rides, especially after I joined the back and the front together. I have been just knitting on it for hours without seeing much progress and like watching movies and stuff, because it's just stockinette with no math, no shaping, nothing at this point. It didn't really bother me that the yarn is really dark. The second cardigan I'm knitting this fall is something that will be finished much sooner than the Maggie cardigan, and I'm sure about that because I have been having so much fun knitting it. I only started it a couple of days ago, but I can't put it down. I'm ignoring all of my other WIPs for this because it's knit in a really soft yarn, which I'm gonna talk you through in a second, and it's knit on 4.5mm needles. It's mostly stockinette, and this is my Lovisa cardigan. It's from Ingrid Dib. I think it's pronounced Dib, but I'm not sure. It's the first pattern I'm trying from this designer. She has these super trendy Scandinavian style patterns, and I went for the Lovisa cardigan because I absolutely loved this raglan construction. It looks really unique but really minimalistic at the same time. She also has a sweater version with the same construction. I wanted to use up a yarn that I had in my stash since forever, since maybe 2019, 2020 at least. This yarn combo is a veteran in my stash, and I can also see that it matches my nails almost perfectly, which is a fun coincidence. And it consists of this Iren by Yarna, which is their thin thread weight yarn. It's a Ukrainian brand. I mentioned it before, and I don't buy from Yarna anymore, nothing in particular, but I just had an issue with my Serena sweater, which the yarn for got discontinued halfway. So since then I decided to stick to other brands, but anyway, I still have this one in stash, and it's this beautiful like wine red, not burgundy because it's not really purpley, but just this really beautiful cherry red or wine red shade. And this yarn matches the shade almost exactly. This is also something I would not buy anymore. This is a Chinese mink cashmere, which is unfortunately really, really soft and super pleasant to work with, but I try to not support any yarn brands in which I can't be like sure that the yarn can be traced to a sustainable or at least somewhat regulated factory, and I have no idea where this cashmere slash wool comes from. I know that this yarn is available on Temu. I don't want to support that, so if I find it in like a thrift store or on something similar to Facebook Marketplace in Ukraine, I will probably buy more of a similar yarn, but I will not pay for it directly to the manufacturer or like seller anymore because I just don't find it to be a good use of my money. I first wanted to knit the Chantal sweater, which didn't work out, and while I was working on that sweater, I realized that this yarn will probably look best in just plain stockinette. I am so happy I found this Lovisa cardigan pattern because I just adore this fabric. It looks so plump. It looks so straight. This combo is also really soft, and because I'm using a thread weight yarn, I was able to match the gauge exactly and just make sure that everything is super nice and filled in. But I also have to admit that the Lovisa cardigan was not my first choice for this yarn this time. I originally wanted to knit a pattern called Heia Rundgenser. It's a Norwegian pattern by Rauma Yarns, and I think you know where I'm going with this. I really liked that pattern. I thought it looked so trendy and so fun. It has a really wide ribbing with these stockinette curled edges. I just love everything about it. I thought it would look so beautiful in this cherry color. I made a swatch, I got gauge, I was like, perfect, I'm just like ready to go. But I thought for a second that maybe it's gonna be the same as with Sadness Garn patterns where you can't just like directly buy them, but I was like, no, okay, I can add this to the cart. I can just buy the PDF pattern. Great, amazing. Went to the checkout. It tells me I need to buy yarn along with the pattern because the patterns are not sold separately from the yarn. Oh, I know it's not a big deal. I can choose whatever pattern I want instead, but I just find it to be needlessly frustrating when you are ready to give somebody your money, but they just won't accept it. So I wasn't able to purchase the Heia Rundgenser pattern. I went looking for another pattern to use in the same gauge and found the Lovisa cardigan, which I'm really enjoying. So it all worked out in the end. And I'm pretty sure it will be finished the next time you see me, because I also am really excited to finally have this yarn be out of my stash. And I will also try and find a good use for this remaining cashmere yarn, because probably I will have way too much for this cardigan, and I will try and see if I can find this cashmere secondhand, but I will not buy from Temu, I'm sorry. They have been absolutely flooding me with emails and like sponsorship offers. They seem to be the biggest fans of my YouTube channel, but it's just not gonna happen. I'm not trying to preach or anything. You spend your money however you want, but I think if you can avoid it and if you can afford something more sustainable, don't use Temu. It's just garbage. So next I want to tell you about a pattern that is in my queue, but which I haven't started yet because I am waiting for my WIP pile to be a little bit more manageable before I can cast it on. And before I talk about it, I need to kind of walk you through the acquisitions I got, and I actually haven't bought any of this yarn. My lovely knitting friend Itzel gifted me this package of American yarns all the way from California, which I know is really funny that I just kind of talked about sustainability and buying sustainable if you can, and here I am flaunting the yarns that were sent to me all the way from California to Ukraine. But regardless, it was a gift and I'm really glad to have it. She didn't have to do that, but she really wanted me to work with some American yarns. She also sent me Cascade 220. I have just mentioned that it's a bummer that I can't get my hands on this yarn anymore because I really loved working with it before while it was still available in Ukraine. Now I have 400 grams of this gray. It's just a perfect neutral gray. I really love it. And she also sent me this beautiful lavender shade in case I want to do any color work with this color, but I have some other plans for this yarn already which don't involve any color work, so I will have to save this shade for something else. And she also sent me this yarn from Pearl Soho, which is absolutely not available in Ukraine. She sent me this absolutely gorgeous fuchsia shade, which is called Loganberry, and also a neutral to go with it. It's this off-white shade called, let me see. Heirloom White. I unfortunately have no idea what to use this yarn for. It's of course going to be too small of a quantity to use for a garment unless I make something like a striped vest from it, but all of your suggestions are welcome. These are both sport weight yarns and I have 350 meters of each, so in case you somehow have a perfect project for these in mind, please let me know in the comments because I really want to do this yarn justice. But as I said, I already decided on a project for the gray Cascade yarn, and I will be making the Honeycomb Vest from Sedna Young. I will be combining the Cascade yarn with a strand of silk mohair because both Itzel and people in the comments under my last video mentioned that Cascade pills a lot. Just to be safe, I will be using this off-white silk mohair together with this gray yarn, and I know it would be better to use something, you know, similar in shade, but it doesn't look too bad, it doesn't clash too much, and it's what I had in my stash. So since it's a cabled pattern, it might be really hard to accurately measure your gauge for it, so the designer actually gives you a chart for the swatch. It's really, really convenient. It asks for this pretty narrow swatch, which has all the different cable motifs in it, and I got a gauge. I'm happy to report I actually started with 4.5 millimeter needles, but then decided to switch to 5 because the stitches looked much more kind of relaxed on 5 millimeters. So I will be starting it once I have some finished objects, but I already looked through this pattern and it's so thorough. Every single size is charted, fully charted, so it should be a really straightforward experience knitting it, even though it's all over cables. And I don't know, at some point cables become really intuitive once you learn the cable repeats, so I think it shouldn't be an issue. And I also will have enough yarn to do this project, because since I have just finished my cloud sweater, which is a really simple stockinette worsted weight project, I didn't want to use this Cascade yarn in a stockinette project as well, but stockinette, if I was, planning to knit a sweater from it, stockinette was the only thing I could go for. So instead I decided to make a cabled vest, and I really would have liked to make a cabled sweater, not out of this yarn specifically, but out of any yarn, but I don't have enough of a quantity in my stash to do a cabled project right now. And as I said, I'm not planning to purchase any yarn at the moment, so it's probably something I will think about in winter, or at least closer to it. I have a few beautiful cable patterns in mind, but not right now. Right now I'm going to be focusing on the honeycomb vest. And I think now we can move on to the accessories I'm planning to knit this fall, and I don't have a lot of them. It's a pretty short list, but I will start with a finished object, and it's one of the projects which I knit exclusively on a train ride, just from start to finish. It was cast on a train, it was bound off on a train, and this is my scarf number 4 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. It's a really, really simple accessory. I mostly wanted to use up the yarn. This is also Loch Lomond from BC Garn, and I had about 40 grams of it, and all of it is in this little scarf. This pattern is really simple, really pleasant to knit, and I did a really small modification in which I winged a different edge stitch than suggested in the pattern. And I'm gonna tell you honestly, I don't remember how I did it. I'm looking at it and my brain is just empty. I think I did a yarn over on the last stitch of the row, and then when I turned I knit the yarn over together with the edge stitch, but again I'm not sure. Otherwise I just followed the pattern. It's this really wide triangle, and it's a lot more mindless than the Sophie scarf, for example, because the increases are closer together. I think it's an increase every second right side row or something like that. This would be a great choice for leftover yarns, and because of this stitch pattern you can try and make it striped. You can add a stripe of a different color on the ribbing section here, not on the garter, because it's probably gonna look weird because you will see the purl stitches in a different color. I really recommend this pattern. It's really simple, it's a really kind of minimalistic knit, and also there is a similar pattern I think from Kutuvakika called the Stay Toasty scarf, which uses a really similar motif. It's been keeping me warm, it's been keeping me toasty. Anyway, it's a scarf, it does the job. It's in a really beautiful tweedy neutral color, so I'm just really happy to have it, but I'm not like over the moon about it. And a much more elaborate little scarf I've been working on is my Flora scarf, which I actually showed in my last podcast episode, and I made some progress on it, but I think I messed it up and now I'm not really sure what to do. So I, as I said last time, had more yarn than the pattern calls for, and I'm using a much smaller needle size than intended originally. I'm using 2.5 millimeter needles because my yarn is really thin. I knew that because I had more yarn I would have to extend the center section, and originally I wanted to knit it straight, but then I was like, it's really easy to kind of memorize and repeat lace eyelet pattern, so I can just kind of keep going and increase according to the stitches I need to have to complete the lace pattern. And it seemed much easier in my head than when I actually started knitting it. It would have been easier if I actually wrote down what I was doing, because somehow I completely ignored the fact that I would have to decrease in the same manner once I reached the center. I just forgot about it. So I reached the center and started decreasing and realized that I just don't know what I'm doing. So now I think there is a chance that I will have to rip back this whole section before the marker, because this marker is when the original pattern stops and as you start decreasing, and I would either have to knit straight or sit down and write down and stitch fiddle the increases I would be doing and do the decreases in the same manner. And I'm also noticing that my diamonds are really weird and don't really follow the slope of the scarf symmetrically, so yeah, I'd probably have to rip back. It's a shame because this section took me quite a long time to do. And the yarn I'm using for it is this Isager Alpaca 2. And I really love this muted green shade. And also this yarn has a really slight halo to it, so it fills in the eyelets in the lace pattern really nicely. And I think once I block it, it will look a lot more impressive, or like once I fix this center situation and then finish it and then block it, I'm basically really excited to block it because blocking lace, especially super open lace like that, is one of my favorite things to do as a knitter, to be honest. I adore knitting lace, and I, as I say for pretty much every other project, can't wait to see it finished, but first I have to actually get there. I'm also planning to cast on a really simple pair of socks, and I will be using a reclaimed yarn, or like the yarn from a project I frogged, because I have this really pretty Retrosaria Mondim yarn. I bought it in Copenhagen in 2023. I have a lot of like positive vibes surrounding it. When I got back from Copenhagen, almost immediately I crocheted a bag from this yarn. I really loved that bag. I wore it quite a lot during summer, but then my boyfriend ruined it for me because he said that this yarn reminded him of raw ground beef or like salami. So thank you for that. It's been like 2 years, but I still can't stop thinking about it. And after a while, I made a similar bag, but from a different yarn, from this like mercerized cotton yarn, and I found myself not wearing this one anymore, so oops, look what happened. It's in a skein now, and I think I will use it for its intended purpose, which is socks. I'm not sure, maybe I will wait until I'm done with the Rosie Sweater so I see how much of the off-white Retrosaria color I have left to probably use it for contrasting cuffs or toes, but in any case I'm planning to basically do a really simple pair of house socks, something with, I don't know, wide ribbing or just stockinette. I will see, maybe I will have some leftover silk mohair which I can use to bulken it up a little bit to make it into a proper pair of warm house socks. And the last project I wanted to mention is something I also kind of mentioned in my previous podcast when I got the yarn for it, and it's something that is in my queue and I'm very, very excited to make it, but I kind of don't look forward to it because I feel it might get really tedious after a while. And it's another pattern that needs no introduction. It's the Songbird Mittens, and I wanted to make myself a pair for a while now, but I am kind of hesitant to start doing color work on such a small gauge. I think I might get really bored of it pretty quickly. And the thing is, I know that because I have this secret UFO, which I haven't talked about in like 2 years, and I'm trying to pretend that it doesn't exist. I just can't find it in me to frog the color work progress I've made. I have started in 2023. Even before I started my podcast, I cast on a pair of socks called the Summer Memories socks. It's a beautiful sock pattern. It's all over color work. I still love everything about it except the fact that I have to actually knit the socks. I showed these socks in the very first episode of my podcast as an active WIP, which I promptly abandoned right after I recorded that video and never thought about them again, except for the times where I had to like pull some yarns out of the bag in which I, keep my stash, and I looked at them and was like, oh, maybe I will restart them someday. And that day never came. I just need to sit down and frog them and reclaim the yarn. And anyway, the reason I tell you all this and like reveal my only UFO is that I am kind of scared to start these mittens because I feel like I would just get tired of them really quickly and get sidetracked by some other projects. But at the same time, I do have a good track record of actually finishing smaller colorwork projects. For example, I finished 3 pairs of colorwork mittens last year. Granted, they were on a bigger needle size, but still I didn't find it to be too kind of tedious. I think this pattern would look beautiful in this monochrome combo, so again, once I kind of clear out my pile of WIPs a little bit, I will get some space to start them, and probably I will start them 2 at a time, not the kind of true 2 at a time, but just on different DPNs, so I can make sure that I don't have one finished mitten and the prospect of knitting the other one from scratch, because that's something that will probably discourage me the most. So let's just say I'm very hopeful, and I will talk about them more once I cast them on. And with that, actually, that's the end of my list, and I thank you so much for watching this video until the end. I hope it was entertaining for you and maybe inspirational, and please let me know in the comments what are you working on, what are your knitting plans for this fall, what have you maybe finished already. I would be very, very curious to read your comments, and as always, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing. I would really appreciate it. Maybe send it to a knitter friend who you think might enjoy it. Thank you again so much for watching, for being here, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.